David Mantica, as well as Harlan Bennett, who will be talking to us today about BA and versus SE and what the heck is it. But before we begin, can you introduce yourself? Oh, okay, well, I'll take that mic back.
No, you go first.
Okay. Hello, my name is Harlan Bennett. I am with a company called CapTech Consulting. I am the Business Analyst Center of Excellence lead there with that company. I am also with an organization called the International Institute of Business Analysis. They have chapters all over the globe, sort of like INCOSE or PMI. They're strictly focused on business analysis as a practice and as a profession. I'm the DC chapter president for the local area, so hopefully, and before I came out and was doing the whole BA thing, I was a systems engineer for a small company called Lockheed Martin. So I've done a little bit of both. So hopefully I can help bridge the gap on what the differences and the similarities are for BA versus SA.
Great. My name is David Mantica. I'm the president of ASPE. We're a business-to-business for-profit training company based in Cary, North Carolina, but we do a ton of work across North America and across the U.S. We're actually a pretty large training company. Most training companies are between $1 million and $2 million. We've been blessed to be able to scale up quite significantly above that, which is pretty exciting for us. I bring 3 areas to you. 1, I'm a product manager, so I think like a product manager. 2, I'm a business owner, so I'm always thinking about value and growth. And 3rd, I'm an economist. So as we get into this presentation, I'm going to talk to you somewhat of the value of that versus being as technical and as deep as you folks. But what spurred this presentation and Harlan and I together was Harlan had me present for him at an IIBA chapter meeting. And one of the things I was telling Harlan about is that as a company, ASPE's probably trained 40,000 BAs over the last 10 years. But we cannot make BA training work in the DC marketplace. I'm like, Harlan, what's the skinny? What's going on? I mean, what's happening? And he's like, well, they're not called BAs in DC. They're called SEs in DC. And so we had a really interesting conversation about that. And in that conversation, Harlan reached out to you folks and said it would be a cool career enhancement, career thought process to kind of talk through what a BA is, what an SE is for your chapter. And I always believe, I'd speak to a lot of chapter meetings, that part of chapter meetings is about career enhancement and understanding the trends in the marketplace for your position and positions that are tangential to your positions. So this presentation isn't going to get into the nuts and bolts of best practice documentation or use case diagramming or any of that technical specifications. We're really going to be looking at it from the marketplace, the industry, what's going on in the marketplace, what's happening, what people are looking for. So we're open to any of those comments or questions. Harlan can also handle some of the technical stuff if we do want to talk about where the crossover is for some of the tool sets and where some of the crossover is regarding some of the things that you folks are using that BAs also use. So make sense? Let's jump on into this thing. So we're going to talk about the SDLC. That's the System Development Lifecycle. So most of you practice in that SDLC environment. From there, we're going to talk about the challenge of complex systems. And that's really started my brain going with the difference between the SC and the BA, having to do with complexity and having to do with regulatory environments. And what is going on with that, and why did one position mature, what didn't mature in another segment of the economy, and why did another position mature in another segment of the economy? So what was going on with that? So we'll talk about those complex systems, and we'll talk about this idea of the new holy grail for system and software development, especially on the commercial side, and what's producing a lot of revenue and money for companies going after that holy grail. We'll talk about SE at a high level, very high level. Won't spend too much time there. You folks know and understand it. Then we'll go into a BA overview. We'll talk about the thing called Agile. So how many folks have run into Agile in some way, shape, fashion, or form? Okay, good. So we'll talk about that as a disruption to traditional requirements analysis, traditional requirements gathering techniques, and the pros and cons associated with that. From there, we'll talk about the BA evolutionary model, and then we'll connect the two. We'll talk about what an SE can do to maybe get into the BA space over time in their career planning, what an SE might want to do to utilize the skill set of a BA for some of the projects that they're working on. Because one of the things I looked at your position is that you're interdisciplined, as in you're doing so much. And as things continue to get more complex, are there opportunities to utilize talented people to help you with some of that complexity and deal with some of the issues you're dealing with? So anything you want to add to that, Harlan, before we jump into the slides?
Nope, that's good.
All right, the SDLC. So the biggest thing that the IIBA, that's the International Institute of Business Analysis, when they started talking about this BA position, they started thinking about it from a translation perspective. Translating technical specifications over to business terminology, but also translating business terminology over to the technical folks. And as you see, and as we're going to talk about over time, this business analyst position, not the skill, but the position, is slowly morphing and moving more to the business side of the dynamic. Because as companies flatten, executives have less and less time to really truly think through the why of where they're going and what they're going to use the solutions for on the commercial side. Not the complex side that you folks are dealing with, but on the commercial side. So we're seeing a lot of that BA growth in that business side of the camp. And one of the things that Harlan and I were talking about is that traditionally the SE side, the systems engineering side, had a tendency to dig deeper into the technical side, as in the really detailed specifications of building the F-35 and all the minutia involved with making a complex plane fly and do the things it's supposed to do. The same level of, actually a higher level of technical difficulty, but you don't necessarily have to figure out the overall vision and bring that down. A lot of that's going on for you, and you're developing new solutions to make things work better in that environment. So there's some element of this difference right there in how much tied to the business is the position versus how technical the position is. But for all intents and purposes, the IIBA has been building this business analyst position to move slowly and ever so slowly deeper into the business side of the universe, but ultimately trying to cross that chasm. Anything you want to add to that, Harlan?
Yeah, they've been a lot of that focus has been similar in the same places as SC, where you focused on developing systems, developing products, a lot of the same kind of things that you do in terms of eliciting and getting at your requirements base. But like David had mentioned, they are now starting to see themselves more as a strategic player. So somebody that could sit at the right hand of somebody in the CXO office that can help to drive strategy. So, SEs have been playing that role with different organizations. I think BAs are starting to play that role, but they also realize that interrelational parts and pieces, making sure that you're good at doing multiple tasks, where instead of just focusing on that requirements analyst piece, they are starting to grow in those areas. So you'll see them talk about IT, you'll start to see them talk about specifics like Agile, business intelligence. So they're trying to do what SE has been doing for a little while now.
So traditionally, as we start looking at the business environment, and a typical corporate business environment, you have an issue associated with your mission, and you're tying your values and your visions to that mission. There's a little bit of refurb. Daniel will handle that. From there, you've got goals and objectives. And what we're talking about here is, this is the chasm piece that we talked about previously in the slide, right? You have a chasm that you got to cross, and that chasm ultimately is in the execution of the projects. What's slowly happening in that business analysis world on the commercial, the less complicated commercial side, and when I talk about that, I'm talking about retail. I'm talking about finance. I'm talking about insurance. And this is where the proliferation of BA positions have really blown up, where the Walmarts of the world have 400, 500, 600 BAs alone, where the Fidelities of the world have 500, 600 business analysts running around. You're getting movement up to participate in trying to figure out the goals and objectives before you even kick off the project. So this is kind of an evolutionary piece of the position, but ultimately the goal for both sides, whether you're dealing in the complex environment and the systems you're building, is to ultimately deliver for the stakeholders. But the issue going deeper and deeper that we're going to talk about is trying to define need, and need that can turn into money that can provide a return on investment. So those are the things we're going to dig deeper into. Anything you want to add with that slide?
Yeah, just the need piece. They've been really harping on adding value. So that's the overarching theme for what a BA is supposed to bring to an organization, is value. So how do you go about doing that? How do you make sure that the requirements are succinct? How do you make sure that you are truly getting at the true requirement and bringing that forward to bring the best value for your customer?
Question?
Yeah, well, no, I just had a comment. So For SE in the federal space, all of us are supporting different customers in the federal space, and so you're saying that we don't tie, and actually I disagree with that, because as a system engineer, enterprise architect, I am tying my requirements, my technical requirements, my business requirements, back to the CIO shop, to their mission priorities and their mission goals.
Yep. And that there is, what we're going to talk through is the fact there are significant connections. And one of the challenges for me was, why weren't we selling business analysis training in the DC market? Is because they weren't seeing themselves as business analysts, or seeing themselves as SEs. Yes, sir.
So maybe it's just obsolete terminology, but I expected you to say business process engineering at some point.
Business process engineering phase of the 80s and 90s is still relevant, but really what it's more tying back to is straight automation planning. Because most of the commercial, not the complex government and military projects you're working on, the commercial side, most organizations in finance and insurance are continually automating their systems to reduce scale and scope, but they're actually changing it and actually trying to drive money from it. That's the biggest difference. In the 90s, it was about process automation to reduce headcount. Now it's about process automation, one, to provide efficiencies, but two, to make money. Two, to make money. You're building systems and solutions that you can make money with very quickly. And Google was the one that really pioneered that. I mean, if you look at Google technology, Yahoo had Google technology first with a company called Overture. So Overture had the pay-per-click technology. Yahoo bought it. Yahoo didn't do anything with it. Google looked at the requirements, talked to their customers, built a system that could actually be monetized appropriately, and actually took that to market. And now 95% of the revenue is pay-per-click search. So this is the big trend we're seeing. Is that as you exactly, that's where it's at now. So on the commercial side, from a business analysis perspective, that's why the investment is occurring, because they're looking at driving top line revenue. At the end of the day, when you look at a company like Fidelity, it's an IT company that just happens to do financial services. And if you dig deep into the heart of the company, we do a program called LEAP with them, and they're just bringing in hundreds of new IT professionals every single year and going through a 3-month program to help them build new IT systems. It's a great question, great conversation. So let's dig into this some more. So basically, an overview of the SDLC, you see the position. As IT has grown, the SDLC need has grown. And that's a big part of this, is the fact that without IT growth, there would be no such thing as the business analysis position in commercial environments. The SE position would always be there. The complexities involved with building an airplane, building a military system, building a federal commercial system is gigantic, and it would always be there. Even when there wasn't IT, it was always there, because there's an element of manufacturing, there's an element of administration. But on the commercial side, you're getting more and more growth with this position because of IT growth. So anything you want to share on those 2 slides?
No, that's good.
So the challenge. Ultimately, regardless of what side of the fence you're working on, the challenge has been the fact that your end users don't know what they want because they can't visualize it. They can't see it. People like to see and they touch. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, how many words do you think a 1-minute video is worth? A Forrester researcher just came out with this. 10,000, more. More. 1.2 million words. A good 1-minute video, Forrester researcher came out and says worth 1.2 million words. So one of the reasons we needed these positions is to be able to visualize it, sometimes in writing, using good language, other times in documentation and different modeling techniques, whether you're using UML or BPMN, whatever technique you're utilizing, in order to show the flows, the actions, the activities. But that's our problem, is that nobody really knows what it is. The people doing the detailed work aren't going to use it. The people who use it are it's getting so complex they can't understand it. The conversation we were having about airplane pilots, right? The planes are so complex now that if something goes wrong, they can't even land it because they don't know how to land it anymore. You don't know how to work Microsoft operating systems because you don't know the underlying DOS that makes Windows 10 actually work. So that's part of the challenge we're seeing now with regard to why we need these positions and why the proliferation of the BA role is blowing up so much. Anything you want to add to that?
No, that's exactly the case. So they are really going in there and seeing the again, it's just going to continue to come back to value. What kind of value can you bring? So as you're trying to pull all of these pieces together, trying to figure out what the products are, where we have traditionally as a BA have focused on the elicitation, the working with stakeholders, the pulling of requirements versus the giving of requirements. That's really where we have seen ourselves as providing value, where, you have on the systems engineering side, a lot of the work has been, we need a better capability to do X. A lot of times that might look like an airplane. You've got a general idea what an airplane looks like, but there's going to be some tweaks and some really cool state-of-the-art things that you're going to throw in that airplane that are going to require some really detailed scientific work. But at the end of the day, you're going to build a plane. On the other side, they
don't know what they're going to build.
Yeah, because there's a lot of structure, there's a lot of architecture, there's a lot of artifacts that exist in the government just by the very nature. On the commercial side, a lot of places, Wild West. You really don't know what you got or where you're trying to go. So that BA now has taken on the role of pulling all of this information from all of these different places, all of these different people to build that singular vision that then you can go and execute upon.
And it's funny, the BA position in some cases is trying to stretch towards some constants. One constant in the BA world is SharePoint. So a lot of BAs on the commercial side have been building new solutions within the SharePoint environment since it's a constant. Because after you drive so much in the wild, wild west of the unknown, you build a lot of waste. And that's why some of the systems that you've set up on the SC side are going to, overall translate over to the commercial side as the commercial side gets more complex. And this is what I love. This slide really, to me, says it all when you look at the scenario. You have technology and you have requirements. In the early days, the technology was somewhat simple, and the requirements, not many people had an opinion about what they wanted and how they wanted it. So you can take a few people together and solve major problems. As technology has proliferated and as end users' requirements have become more sophisticated, you've got a level of complexity and a level of complication that is really blowing up. And that's really been the SE's world for years and years and years. A level of complexity both in the requirements necessary, the minutiae of the requirements, and the technical specifications. We're now starting to feel this in the commercial environment, much more side on the requirement side, and the fact that everybody wants to do everything. Think about the bring your own device that's going on within corporate America today, and think about how complicated that can be, and that's part of the BA challenge. But now they're also feeling this little bit of the technology growth, and the fact that you could do 1,000 things with 1,000 different things to come up with the same outcome. I could tell you how I can use Java versus C#. I can tell you how you can use storage versus clients. How to use cloud versus client server, and then what starts happening is what Harlan was talking about. The BA at their heart and soul is really looking at total cost of ownership, return on investment questions, and ultimate revenue goals. But in some of this scenario, we see the BA growth here, and certainly on this side in the technology, why the SC had grown. You had both this environment happening in your areas, and now you're seeing the same type of dynamic happen, but it happened more on the requirement side than it did necessarily on the technology side. Now the technology side is making it even more difficult. Any comments or questions there?
So the only other thing I'd say to this is it's missing a dimension. Time, I think, is the other one that comes into play here. And as we go on, especially in places like cyber, where you're seeing the challenges change on a daily basis. As data is coming at us quicker, we've got to find ways to approach things and tackle problems in a much faster manner. So where we had years to develop a particular aircraft or boat or ship, we've had time to bring all those things to fruition. We're getting to a point now where the technology is literally starting to outpace us. So BAs, that place where BAs has really been pulling requirements, and you guys have been focused a lot on the technology and those really strong state-of-the-art types of things. Those pieces are starting to come together. And there's going to be a lot of this overlap in the skill set where you're going to need to be able to try and succeed or fail quickly, so that you really know whether or not you're getting the right value out of the things that you're trying to develop. Planes are going that way with drones. You know, we're putting up different models, different shapes, different form factors. All these different things are happening where we're trying to move away from the multi-year process down to something a lot smaller, all to make sure that we truly are continuing to bring that value. So,
but ultimately, you'll have to roll back into the detailed project because of the complexity and the
Correct.
regulatory environment.
Yep.
But I think what we're both saying is that there's opportunities for sharing at this point. I think the SE community has some tools and techniques and best practices that the BA community is desperately starting to need as it runs into the technology complications and dealing with the follow-up and the configuration management issues associated with that, the follow-up, the follow-through. And then the same token as Harlan is talking about, the BA community, especially those more sophisticated business analysts, have been involved in the lean startup type concept where they have to fail early and fail often. And what I call that is out of project work. There's a lot of work that happens for a traditional business analyst that happens before the project even kicks off. And then you come to a point of saying, that's where we want to go. Then you do the traditional project specification and roll it through the traditional project cycle. But we can certainly talk more about that in the details of the presentation. But that's happening a lot.
You can just talk.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Perfect. So I see the close to agreement, far from agreement. Is that saying that the requirements themselves, you analyze them and they're non-conflicting? Or are you saying that the stakeholders can generally agree on what they want?
You got so many
Is it
opinions
that
now.
the folks who are making the system agree with the people who are coming to them with requirements? What exactly do you mean by agreement?
I said it's people, and on the commercial side,
Okay.
when you look at the BA world and the retail, insurance, and financial space, you got so many opinions now. It's trying to figure out whose opinion matters the most. And they're getting a lot of complication associated with that because which master do you serve? So the goal is as the BA moves up, they don't necessarily become the master, but they can help manage that stakeholder disagreement to get the consensus faster. And that's what's happening. Most cases, that's some of the biggest challenges that a commercial BA faces.
So that's the conflicting stakeholder needs is what we're looking at there.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
So that holy grail scenario. So ultimately, when you're digging in and trying to figure out how to create value, as Harlan's saying, about providing return on investment to what you're going to do in the future, you have to ultimately get something. So one of the things that PMI talks about, and I'm sure a good SE talks about as well, is you're on schedule, you're on scope, and you're on budget. Everybody's really happy. So everybody should be happy. The problem, like Harlan's saying, as the world is moving faster and faster, we're getting more and more unhappy customers because we're delivering what isn't needed. We missed on our need element. We made the buckets, but we didn't deliver ultimately what will provide us a return on investment. The stories are endless, whether it's the Best Buy story until they figured out how to change their businesses around and their stores around, to the story of Redbox. Redbox is basically a technology company. It's basically a technology company that was Blockbuster, but the style of Redbox was Blockbuster in the cloud, in IT. So you take a same business model, you do good business analysis work, you talk about creating value, and out poofs a beautiful company. It's doing pretty well right now. But it was basically the same business model. So you really have to start, and what's really happening out there in the commercial segment is digging and trying to find need, finding it quicker, and then jumping on it before it runs away to something else. Anything you want to add to that?
yeah, everything is about making sure that you're driving that value quickly, so that you'll hear more and more about Agile. I think we've got a couple slides coming up on that, and that's exactly where the commercial side is going. They're trying to do the fail early, fail often kind of thing and do things a lot faster. So some organizations are really embracing it, and even the ones that are sticking with traditional waterfall are doing it in a much quicker pace, 2-month, 3-month, maybe even a month type of cycle to get some of this capability out quickly.
And it's not the whole project, but we'll get into that. It's an element of the project that you can rechange and rescope multiple times through the project cycle. So an SE, you know who you are, so we'll go pretty quickly through these slides, but as we're digging into some research, basically interdisciplinary approach, successful systems tied to satisfied customers. When you start looking through this, I mean, I see, from my perspective, you know, there's elements of business analysis, but there's so much more. And as I started digging deeper into this, you have operations, you have performance, you have tests, you have manufacturing. So as I started looking at this through my SDLC lens, I started seeing project management work. So an SE equals project management work. You're managing a complex project, an element of that project. I see Six Sigma. I see some of you might having either lean capabilities or Six Sigma capabilities. You're dealing with quality, defects, managing defects. I see that. I see testing. I see the understanding of quality assurance, quality control, even to the point of managing and looking at testing. Then ultimately, I see business analysis. I see the requirements of elicitation and understanding stakeholder and stakeholder management. So you're seeing a multifaceted approach here. And some of my thoughts have started tying to what happened on the commercial SDLC side. I call it the splitting of the project manager atom. On the commercial side, the project management position has been around for almost 46 years now. PMI started in 1969. That position now has been stretched and morphed so much that there's been a heightened level of specialization going on. You're adding a QA department, you're adding an architecture department, you're adding a business analysis department. So some of the crossover that we're going to start talking about, or you can start theorizing, is where does it make sense for a strong SE to hire in a business analyst at a junior level who understands requirement elicitation, allow that person to run with that to support your overall project goals. Now that might already be happening, I don't know, but that was certainly one tie-in that I was thinking about. Any thoughts you want to add to this slide as we go deeper?
So the big thing is the interdisciplinary. I mean, SE has been living and breathing that from the day that the entire practice was created. And it had to, just by its very nature. Business analyst has been, as David mentioned, very segmented. So they saw themselves as you were either a pure BA, you were a QM person, you were an architect. And they split those roles out exclusively to being one thing or another. And I think they have started to realize that they need to be more interdisciplinary. They realize as people do more of these roles, understanding how the testing is going to work when you're developing your requirements, understanding what the full picture is when you build one particular component, they are starting to see that they need to also be interdisciplinary. So they're moving in that direction.
Especially as they move up the business cycle.
Yep.
As they go up into what we might call a solution architect, is that they have to wear a broader hat. Just like an SE has to wear a much broader hat when you dive into a much more complex project or a much more highly, what can I say, a project that has a microscope underneath it. You're managing all aspects. And then we're looking at putting scientific knowledge to work, and you're putting scientific knowledge to work in some art areas. And we'll see the next slide as well, but you have systems knowledge, so you have to have that technical bent. You have to understand how to manage the people aspect of it. Although a BA will probably focus more on their people skills than the SE will based on the nature of who they're interacting with on a daily basis, there's still an understanding of management, understanding product life cycle. This whole lean startup, when do you roll a product out? How do you manage a product through its entire life cycle? That's a product management responsibility. You have elements and responsibilities in that space. And then, of course, domain knowledge, which is the stronger and deeper you are in a specific area, the more valuable you are. And guess what? That's the same exact thing for a BA in the commercial side. A BA in the commercial side, a middle level BA, a BA level 1 or BA level 2, who starts really building domain knowledge in a specific industry becomes very valuable, and that is transferable. And that's the reason why the position didn't die during the recession of 2009. You know that your industry contracted a bit, but your SEs are never going to go away, and the complexities involved with building the systems and the build that you do. But there was a good chance that the BA position could have went away, first through outsourcing, and second through the recession, but it didn't, actually grew. And it grew in a lot of cases because of the value of that domain knowledge. They know where all the bones are buried. Just like you know where the bones are buried within your projects, they as well know where the bones are buried in legacy systems within their environments as well. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. So dealing with a lot of legacy mainframes and the craziness that have been around for 60, 70 years, especially financial services, insurance, they're dealing with systems and software that nobody even works on anymore. Talking about COBOL systems. Some people probably know a little bit about COBOL systems, but there aren't very many people that can even develop on COBOL anymore. So how do you keep all that stuff in place and move to the next level? So bringing all that together.
And that's another area where SEs have a really interesting opportunity to cross over. as the banks become more and more complicated, their legacy systems are buried so deep. And someday someone's going to come a calling and saying those things have to be changed. And the opportunity, the financial opportunity there is significant, because all it's been is middleware, patch up on a continual basis to get access to those systems. At some point, some piper's going to be called, and there's a great opportunity for the discipline that you have and the approach that you take in the projects you work on that hasn't been taken. I almost liken this a lot of occasions to the telecom world versus the IP world. Telecom was perfect. Pulse code modulation, the phones didn't, it was built so your phone call didn't drop. IP was a mess. It worked sometimes, not all the time. And so when we got used to IP being the way it was, and that's really on the BA side, that's what happened. In a lot of cases, SIPSs were built because we had to get it done, but not built with the discipline underneath. And at some point, something's going to be called to the carpet. So the art and the science, you have system science engineering, you have system thinking. That's the value attribute. You have to be, you can't just be a pure scientist in this space, because there's an art associated with thinking about where do you go next, how do you tie things together, how do you problem solve, and those are the things that should be preached at the school level. Building T-shaped SCs, which is you have a technical expertise, but you have an overall top of the T, broad portfolio of professional skills that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But this is critically important to having, and as you know, a successful systems engineer. But guess what? It's similar in the BA space. Very similar. They're working both sides of the brain as well. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just continually reaching out and figuring out how to get that capability, the true requirement from folks, I think is really the biggest part of that, right? So that you're ensuring and honing the skill set to know which truly is the requirement and how do you get those requirements from people. That's really where a lot of that focus has been spent on the BA side. That I think is going to be incredibly helpful on both sides, just to be able to get at any of these new requirements that have to be pulled a bit more than just given.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
And this was a slide that blew my mind. As I looked at this and did some initial research associated with the presentation, I actually started trying to color code the different specialties. I didn't do too well, but my reds were BA specialties, where a business analyst actually plays on the commercial side. My green was going into some QA side. I could have started doing the project management a different color. It's truly an interdisciplinary whatever, multifaceted position that, as you start looking at some of the peers that you have available to you, there might be an opportunity to start building a junior level SC, a business analyst type position in this environment to help dealing with the complexities, because the marketplace is building them. There are a group of people out there now that understand requirement solicitation and the communication to a stakeholder and actually writing a good use case document and doing good BPMN notation. There is people out there that have that and specialize in it, because that scares me. I don't want to do your job. I mean, that's crazy, but it's also exciting. I mean, if you're looking, as students, if you're looking for something that's going to keep you interested the rest of your life, there it is, without a doubt. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so we've talked about it a couple times now that really on the BA side, we focus a lot more on the business and less on the technology. And one of my major pushes for my organization, both as the IABA, but also in my consulting role, is I'm pushing my consultants, I'm pushing my membership to bring on more of the technology piece, more of the scientific rigor, because as we do these things and get into more complex systems, you start talking about big data on the scale of the Googles and the Amazons of the world. You truly need to move into that scientific thought and point of view to make sure that you're really getting at all of the information properly and delivering that, again, back to the business value.
That's a great thought.
Marrying everything that you have known for all this time on the business side, but also bringing in the technology.
I think big data has a really good piece that you talked about in dealing with the scientific practice because of the complexities that that area is going to bring. And there's no scientific practice going on with the management of data right now at all. So what is a BA? Software systems engineering, technical, covers a wide area. System software analysis and design. So you had those for numbers of years, as you know and well, in your industry and your marketplace. And then in 2003, the International Institute of Business Analysis really tried to take what was a skill set, a specific skill set, that requirements elicitation, and try to build a position out of it. So to take it from business analysis and convert it to a business analyst. So building of a position. And the model is very similar to the model that PMI took. PMI built a trade association and worked to grow a position of what was normally done by a number of different people for a number of different reasons. And they ended up building a 10 million plus position over 40 years called the project manager. So the IIBA had this push to build this business analyst position. Now going into 2015 and beyond, really what's happening on the commercial side is an in-project versus out-of-project evolution. As I said, organizations are flattening. Companies are flattening. Holacracy is a big term. A company, Zappos, did that, where nobody has a job title, everybody is on par, and they work on teams that they come together in a self-organized fashion. You're losing the ability to take time to make strategy and vision. So this BA role is taking place in a lot of cases in helping corporate executives drive strategy and vision as it evolves and grows from initially being a requirement elicitation for software systems within retail, finance, insurance, and utility and transportation. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as the BA profession grows, I've come from a consulting background. That's what my company is. But really, the profession itself is really looking at the BA as an internal consultant, somebody who can work amongst the different teams, who can start to marry the different segments that are in an organization into a holistic picture and a holistic strategy. So as they move up that chain, they really are working amongst each other, trying to create that larger vision and that larger picture that is going to help to continue to drive value for the organization.
So the profile, I really say a BA is like an internal product manager. They're building solutions that internal people will utilize in order to increase productivity and actually make money. The best BAs have a product manager mindset. And that's why initially a lot of project managers tried to become BAs, but it did not work because their mindset is more of a general manager. When you look at a project manager, they have a general manager mindset, which is operations, budget, time, schedule. A BA can't think that way. A BA's got to be willing to slow something down if they're going to deliver value that's ultimately going to provide exponential increased value for the company. And so that kind of goes against the project manager's mindset. So the other piece of it is the three areas. Area number one is requirements elicitation and managing the requirements document through the in-project phase. Number two, which is growing, is enterprise analysis, and we'll get with that a little bit later, and then process modeling. The idea of looking at the future state, as in, if we do X, what will it look like and how will we be impacted? So those are the three specific areas. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, as they grow, that's really a lot of the focus. You guys have been doing process modeling for eons and
I had a
eons.
question on one bullet is converting from technical to business requirements. That sounds backwards.
So he actually said it a little bit earlier. So it's the marriage of the two. So you're going from technical to business in some cases, but also from the business back to the technical. So where we were traditionally focused on the business, helping to translate down to the technical side, we're also, as we are fitting that more strategic role, we are explaining that the finance group or the mortgage group in a bank, they do X and they do it this particular way. And
So
this is the technology that they use. And we're pushing that technology back up to the business so that they understand how they marry everything together in a unified package.
A perfect example of this is, I don't know how many VPs of sales I've heard in the commercial segment. I want Salesforce, I want Salesforce, I want Salesforce. For no rational reason besides they saw a commercial or they said everybody has Salesforce. So what they're doing as a BA is saying, okay, we have some technologies here in our company, man, that could do better than Salesforce can do, and driving that up through the organization and getting that salesperson away from adding another solution that we could have done something else with. And that's part of the product, that's part of the trying to get away from the shelfware concept. And then when it works really well because you get increased utilization out of your infrastructure of assets. So who governs it? The IIBA is the International Institute of Business Analysis. It's been around for, 12, 13 years now. They have 2 certifications. They have a new body of knowledge. The new body of knowledge is 3.0. It's a bigger, thicker document. It took quite some time to come out. It's got some specialty areas around business practices, which really ties into the business aspect and growing more aligned with the driving business outcomes. And then there's this new certification from PMI that's causing a little bit of confusion in the marketplace, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, just so the BA BOC getting some negative feedback for those that have lived in the BA space, the process for them to actually create their next version of the body of knowledge, I think, was either a 6 or an 8 year process. It took an incredibly long period of time, and it was arduous, very unorganized, didn't have very much rigor to it. So there has been. People have been excited about it, but it took so long and was so difficult to get to it that and it's so large that people have had a hard time sort of digesting it all. So there has been some negative feedback, but the overall moving in the correct direction.
I think more discipline and rigor.
So I see the BA position means something different to different organizations and different stakeholder communities.
Correct.
So as a systems engineer in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had Microsoft certified systems engineers, which was kind of the bane of our existence. Is there an equivalent BA or business analyst position or description that causes confusion for you guys?
Everything. It's called everything and anything. It's systems analyst, business systems analyst, business analyst, documentation writer,
Technical analyst, system architect, business architect, enterprise architect.
So which one do you hate the most?
Buddy, that's a better one for the practitioner.
So is there a federal job series?
So they're trying to do what PMI did, and they haven't gotten there yet. After 12, they're only 12 years in.
And is there a common category used in people's labor category contracts?
Not in the federal side, but the state side is starting to happen. So example is New York State. New York State ITS just centralized their IT organization, about 5,500 people, and they're starting to do their civil service exam with a BA position involved, and they're updating it for BA level 1 and BA level 2. But this is in the nascent stages. And yes, go ahead, another question?
So another question, totally different. You mentioned top line repeatedly. So you go to somebody in the government, they go to top line.
Exactly.
They're not supposed to, they don't think they're supposed to.
That's right.
I'm sorry.
Actually, the live people actually can hear them. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's just if you talk up for the room, you're fine.
Okay. So do you have an idea on the concept you wish to substitute that for in the
I don't know if
space?
the BA role will actually grow in the government space, because you already have strong SEs in the space. It may become a junior position with the SE utilizes. It might become a junior SE to help support the project rollout, and may never grow in the government space because there's an element of maybe not necessarily needed. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so believe me, we do need business strategists and business process analysts. That's for sure. And there's not much of that happening. But when you convert it to top line and talk about value, those are commercial terms, and you need to have some hook on that if you're going to translate the concept into the government space. That's all.
It's interesting that the federal CIO level, since there are so many of them, a lot of cases you would think the CIO would take on some of that strategy as it relates to data management and data ownership and process ownership. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. Do you have any thoughts on that, Harlan?
So I think as back to the speed thing, I think as things start to go faster and we need to get capability out quicker and there's less certainty around the direction, I think you're going to see a lot of that skill set pop up more and more. A lot of the guys that are the consulting firms that are consulting with the government, the Accentures, the Deloittes, the Booz Allens, they have both BAs and SEs on staff. So they've got people that are providing that business oversight and that business strategy, but at the same time.
I do like the idea of the 2-minute ConOps video, though.
2-minute what?
ConOps video.
You know, the thing that Harlan said kind of resonates with me in the fact that maybe the government's already used to outsourcing some of that strategy to some of the bigger firms. So the opportunity isn't so much in the federal government as it is with the consulting firms for this position to grow. Potentially.
Well, I don't know if this is exactly the same thing, but I've seen what contractors call functional analysis.
Very similar, yeah, that's a title that's used for BA.
Yeah, another title.
It's a speed, let's say if it's a medical system, they know how that medical system's going to work or whatever it might be.
That's a junior level business, not junior, but it's a mid-level business analyst. They're called a functional analyst, and they have a subject matter expertise bent.
Subject matter expert, by the way, tends to be one of the highest priced labor categories in the catalog.
Yes.
Just for your information.
That's interesting. So that's where the position built out of. So the IIBA's mindset really started out as that type of functional analyst, providing specifications on the system and the use of that system so that people can use it appropriately. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Good conversation. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, but at the same time, SEs, they know how to do enterprise architecture. Actually, if you do enterprise architecture the right way, you're actually doing the strategy, you're doing the business strategy. I'll give you, for example, right? The DoD has their tiered accountability, right? So at the lower levels, you have more granular detail, but as you're going up, you have more high-level strategies. But that's what it is. It's the architecture that builds upon, your strategy to be able to, for example, the DoD BEA, Business Enterprise Architecture. You might be like, well, that's really high level. Well, of course it is, because the DoD has their lines of business that they want. I don't care if you're Air Force, Marine Corps, Navy, it doesn't matter. You're being able to align and federate up, to be able to say, okay, this is where we're going. This is the business strategy. We're going in Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the things I've always thought about enterprise architecture as done with government, there's nothing in the Zachem model or anything like that that actually tells you how to do business strategy. They talk about documenting it once you have it. Right. There really isn't anything in most enterprise architects.
Well, one thing,
that's why we say
to keep us moving forward.
I agree with you. I guess
I think the thing you got to think about is time. Ultimately, you say there's an opportunity for the enterprise architecture position to roll up and move up, but it needs time. With the position and the work that the SE does, is there an opportunity for a new position to be built out of the SE role to help support the SE so the SE can move up and do business strategy tied to enterprise architecture to formulate solutions for the business? Even though it's not top line revenue, you can still talk about providing better customer service to your constituencies with better tools and systems.
Mission accomplishment is what you'll talk about, but same thing.
So who governs the role? We talked about that, and then the growth factor. This goes back to the concept of the proof and why, and the fact that it is growing. In the midst of the recession in 2009, 2008, 2009, in the midst of a large and gigantic outsourcing trend, which really chopped a lot of the developer skill sets and sent it out to other places, this position has grown. Most of the salary surveys I've done 3 or 4 salary surveys, puts the average salary rate in that $80,000 to $76,000. That's throughout the U.S. That growth factor is pretty close to it. The number of jobs continues to grow. So on the commercial side, they found the fact that this is needed. And a lot of it had to do with need. Going back, ultimately, I can outsource a developer, but the developer can still not build what I need. So I might save some money, but I get nothing of value back. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just needed that person that was going to help to do that translation. And that's really the biggest role.
Yes, sir.
Be able to answer this tonight, but we're using the term value, and I have an idea what that really means, and it's sort of a nebulous definition. Could you maybe describe a little? Money's a part of it.
So it starts off with productivity. So, and I would measure productivity in system use. So one of the best metrics that a commercial BA could be utilized by, I built a new system, how many people are using it, and how much more time are they using that system. So that's value, and the fact that I built a system and people are utilizing that system. Next is money. Did I produce revenue from the system I built? Am I seeing a return on investment associated with that and revenue growth? There's number 2. Number 3 is cost savings to the organization on the G&A level. Can I build a system that enables me to automate so that ultimately I reduce headcount within the organization? Not the nicest thing to talk about, but the world and the business world still thinks that way. So those are 3 value metrics I have seen and heard talked about as it relates to the business analysis position. Use metrics. And then the third thing being productivity enhancement, which drives reduced headcount.
So I'm thinking like, not that I want to be here for another hour, benefit over cost equal value. So with an index in there that will help you measure value, and it's very hard to measure.
So I would tell you this, give them a phenomenal presentation. You found the first crossover for business analysis and SEs, teaching the business analysis community how to present the metrics of value that they provide to the commercial entities. It's a missing link. I gave you 3 areas, but there's no white paper out there that defines specifically how a BA provides value in the marketplace.
So just some of the places that they're trying to touch upon that. So where you see quality management being the measure of whether or not you met your true requirement, value is really whether or not you're hitting the vision that the group was looking for. So whether that's a cost measure, whether that's a speed measure, whether that's time to market, whatever the factors are that the vision set out to really accomplish, how well you met those is the value that you're delivering.
But that's a great crossover presentation topic, a great white paper to present.
Love it.
Phenomenal topic.
I didn't really think of it, by the way. I read that somewhere.
Well, that's a it's definitely a needed point. I did a white paper on measuring BA value, but it's still at the very esoteric level, not at the true mathematical level. So Agile. So Agile is a disruption to business analysis work, but it's a disruption at the in-project level. Don't think about Agile as being the defining scope or looking at what you're going to do next. Think about Agile as it relates to as you work, you get more points and opportunity to redefine your work than running through the entire project. That's really what you want to be thinking about it. At the end of the day, it's a plan-driven approach versus adaptive approach once you've decided on what you're going to do. Agile has nothing to do with defining what you're going to do. It has everything to do with once you're doing it, to try to do it that you can get closer to need and not get sidetracked. That's what, on the software side specifically. Anything you want to add to that?
That's a lot of times they've been getting, BAs specifically have gotten a little bit of heartburn on the fact that BA isn't mentioned in Agile in the framework at all. There's no mention of a business analyst or a systems engineer or anybody that's doing that hardcore requirements work up front. They talk a little bit about it, maybe a product owner or something like that. But that's where a lot of that work has shifted in Agile, especially for BAs, is helping to define that strategy, helping to break it up into whatever those chunks or those iterations are going to be so that they can be executed over the run.
But there's also a lot of collaborative because, with Agile, you're writing user stories, but you're writing user stories to a level where there's collaboration. So you come back together with the people that are involved with it, and so you can be able to collaborate and be able to define and have more granular detail into it.
Yeah, but you already defined where it is you're trying to go, and then you're just making sure what you're doing as you're going is hitting the need.
Yes.
That's the nicest thing about Agile, is that in a plan-driven approach, you're locked in and you run for 14 months to a year or whatever, 14 months to 2 years without much time to change unless you're stuck with a change order. With Agile, you're breaking your deliverables out into 4 to 6 week increments, and each time you can reestablish a change in what you want to build the next time around. That's the difference. And the big thing is that BA thinks it's a disruption to business analysis. It's not, because you still have to define what Scrum 0 is. This is a typical Scrum picture.
Yep.
Nothing in this picture shows the decision made before you go. This picture is all about going. I made a decision to go, and now we're running. And what you're doing is you're building a backlog of differences and changes and things that happen during that cycle of the project time. And then you're defining if that's valuable enough to change and rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. The downside of Agile is perfectionism. If you're too much of a perfectionist, you'll never get done. You always build on top of what you're thinking is the most important thing. So there is a lot of risk in Agile if you don't watch out, without a doubt. The other side of the risk is you can still miss need. At the end of the day, without a strong product owner, Agile still misses need, just like every other development methodology can still miss need without the right connection with the sponsor. And that's why that BA role or the SE role, depending on the environment, is so critical. Because regardless, you still have to have that connection to define what it is you're doing and what that output's going to do for the organization.
The problem is you're missing the one piece that starts that process, which is called functional requirements. Okay, so where do those come?
The Agile space, it's determined that it's already been done. Exactly. And they think it'll elaborate over time.
So that's exactly where the business analyst or the system. does their job, is to hand them the functional requirements to do that.
And that's where the determination, but a Scrum team, a traditional Scrum team would say that would never happen. It would just be elaborated. I know, but I'm saying an evangelical Scrum person will tell you never have a Scrum Zero. You start the project off and you'll start collaborating, and then you'll have all these emergent requirements pile up into your backlog, and away you go. But we understand that's airy fairyland. Yes, sir.
So I guess two quick things. First, it seems like a lot of the architecture, systems engineering, business analysis happens to the left, and a lot of the testing, QA, validation, there's a lot of the in-process end product happens on the right, and maybe a systems engineer sees a lot of the agile kind of toward the middle implementation step. But question I have for you guys, because you're not the first presentation to come in here. Complex systems, well, about agile. Complex systems and waterfall. Can you explain how those two are on any planet related?
Complex systems and waterfall. First off, this is not an agile presentation. Make sure you realize. This is
go back 2 slides. You'll know what I'm talking about.
Right there.
I'm sorry, 1 slide.
Right there.
No, you had that guy.
Okay.
So we've been talking about complex systems all night, and that's a waterfall.
Yeah, that's waterfall.
So give me your thoughts. So I'm sorry, I'm not grasping the question.
So
ignorance.
So
tell me your answer to the question so I can get it.
I guess I can progressively elaborate my question.
Yeah.
So Agile works under the assumption that your requirements will elaborate.
Yes.
While a plan-driven waterfall approach assumes they don't. And most systems that
it doesn't assume it doesn't. It just gives you a more difficult time to incorporate those.
You're spending a lot of time on that requirement.
Yes, exactly. And so the concept of the world changes in both areas. This place puts change in a box and tries to make it as difficult as possible to change. This says, okay, we'll change and we'll just keep changing and adapting. Both based on the premise that it's been told what to do already.
Gotcha.
Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Neither methodology does anything to do with why. That's what drives me crazy about this. I'm a business owner. All I ever do is think about why. Every day of my life is why. But every time I dig deeper into the SDLC, it drives me crazy because because you guys are stuck with having to argue about why did they tell us to do this? Doesn't make sense. So I'm more looking at what are the positions in the environment in the SDLC that help define why before either one of these things kick off. The SC does that, and the BA and the commercial side is doing that. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess my other question, this might become a paper, which is why I really want answers.
Yeah.
Why do a lot of business analysts and Scrum types think that systems engineers hate Agile?
That's a great question. You would probably answer that better.
I don't think that they think that SEs hate Agile. Yes, I think it's that they look at the government and the way that the government operates and don't see how the Agile model fits. I know there have been strides taken by the government to allow more adaptive approaches. They are trying to, just from the contractual side, how they do contracts.
The disconnect between Agile and contracting.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah,
I think that's more where it is versus an actual thinking that you guys can't handle it.
An SE approach to Agile would be a wonderful white paper. And the thing you want to be thinking about is the thing now is not Agile evangelistic, Agile hybrid. What is the Agile hybrid approach? What are the practices? Because Agile is extendable. It's open source. You've got all different flavors of Agile as long as you base it back on the best practices and the values. I think it's a great opportunity to write a cool paper on that. So so to not dig deeper into the Agile space, all we're going to say is that with requirements elicitation, Agile is a disruption. And the fact that there's a lot of business analysts who think, well, I'm not needed any longer because I'm not eliciting requirements in the traditional way, having a phased approach and having a specific time box to do those requirements, right? But that's not correct. Yes, requirements elicitation changes when you're in the project, but I don't call that requirements elicitation. I call that requirements management. When you really look at Agile, it's more about how you're managing those requirements and then adapting those requirements during the project phase. Nothing changes with iteration 0. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, the more of the focus as we talk about the strategy and the strategic pieces and how we play into that, focusing on that initial part and how we bring the most value into the process to begin with is a lot of that focus that IABA as an organization has been pushing, looking at it as more of a strategic role.
So is BA a work or a role or a skill? In the back of your mind, you seeing it as a skill set that you bring to the table. It's one of my many skills that I have. The IIBA tried to create a role in the business out of it. And the commercial side of the world jumped at it, and it's grown. But PMI jumped out and said, what do they think about BA role? BA is a disruption to traditional project management. So PMI developed a certification around requirements management to offer their project managers the opportunity to show BA as a skill in their toolkit. So this is another level of confusion in this already confused environment. We have different names for different positions in the commercial space, right? Now we have a huge trade association saying, well, it's really not a role, it's a skill, and anybody can do it. But remember my demographic profile. A project manager is not necessarily a good BA because they don't think like a product manager. They think like a business owner, and that's dangerous. So although this is causing a disruption, it'll be interesting to see how the marketplace plays. What are you going to say? That question you asked? Comment?
I've been struck by how systems engineering tries to do the whole job.
Yeah.
So we need 58 skills. Project managers try to do the whole job. Acquisition people try to do the whole job.
Project managers now they're being constricted though.
And all I'm saying is that nobody can do the whole job.
No.
No one human can. I mean, it's a big project on that time, not to mention the skills. So it would be nice if the various disciplines did recognize that I need to assume that's there. Now, if that doesn't exist, then I guess you have to stretch yourself and do it.
That's right.
But if it exists, then be leveraging it. And project. I agree with you. Project managers are balancers and
great word.
Balancers. Force balancers and trackers of cost schedule.
Keeping things on track, keeping it on the rails. Well, a good BA in the commercial side wants to take things off the rails if they're not producing what they need. But anyways, let's keep digging into it. We only have a few more slides, so we'll definitely get through this. Is there anything else you want to add on the PM side? Anything else you want to add on the PMI slide?
No.
Okay, so the evolutionary model. So we're getting into this commercial, talking about the commercial side. We're talking about this thing called value. You see the opportunity to maybe condense and offer up positions. What gets me excited about that is we have a horrible job situation in the United States. If you really look at the figures, the top end jobs are growing, the bottom end jobs are shrinking, and management jobs are flattening. There's negative growth in management jobs. There's a ton of growth in top end jobs. There's no opportunity to grow jobs in a middle level. And this is an opportunity for a middle level job. The BA role was a great growth opportunity in the middle level that did not exist. But now it's evolving and it is growing. So the evolving first starts with professional skills. One of the things that a strong BA has to do if they're going to interface with corporate executives is begin to get away from their detail-oriented, persnickety, kind of obnoxious way. All right? A typical, some of you SEs are probably saying that reminds me of myself. A traditional BA can be like that in a corporate environment. They're not used to negotiating. This is the skills documentation we talk about. Emotional intelligence drives everything. If you're not situationally and self-aware, you can't conflict manage. If you can't conflict manage, you can't negotiate. If you can't negotiate, there's no way you're going to drive change management. If you can't drive change management, you can't influence anything. So this is the stack that a lot of BAs are talking about at the professional skill level to begin the evolutionary process. And I think this has got strong crossover in the SE side. As you start dealing with higher end stakeholders who are going to judge you on how you're dressed, the way your shoes look, how you communicate, what's your negotiation style. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so where we have focused on the requirement side, I mean, that's just across the board. That's the foundation of what the BA is really about, managing, eliciting, driving requirements. This is where the focus from the organization as IBA has been on developing the softer skills, those things that are really going to help us to be able to pull and bring the most value and just continue to get that value out of folks. So I agree 100% that this is really where a lot of the focus has been for us as a role and as a skill, is increasing our emotional intelligence, making sure that we can handle change management, how we go about doing this facilitation and this negotiation all across the board so that we're working and capturing all of the needs from all of our stakeholders.
So the out of the project trend, this is what's going on that BA side. You have the in-project space. The in-project space is continued requirements solicitation, requirements management, fulfillment of project deliverables. The out of the project phase is deciding why. Why are we doing this? So you have future state modeling. In order to define why, you have to see the impact. You know this, so you do this, and you understand your impact analysis is probably what you call it. There might be a fancier term, I'm not sure. But ultimately, future state modeling. And then you get companies who do an automation, don't realize how many jobs are disrupted by it, and they just do it. The next is your enterprise analysis. And these aren't in the proper order. Enterprise analysis should be first. This is the determination of the business case. Does this make sense? This used to just be the project manager working with the stakeholders. Not the case in the commercial side. The BA is growing in involvement in this space and helping to define the scope and the business requirements associated with it. A vast majority of the business analysts have their MBAs now. It's a position that starts off in the 30s, the majority of which has a master level degree of one shape, fashion, or form. And most of it is on the MBA side. And then finally, the business architecture. This isn't enterprise architecture. This is where the COO used to live. Understanding each stovepipe and the executable and the capability of each stovepipe. Guess what? The COOs aren't around anymore. So they don't understand the executables within their stovepipe. So you have this business architecture role coming about using TOGAF and some of the tools involved in the TOGAF space to actually document the capabilities across the entire enterprise. Not even on the technical side, on the non-technical side, on the business capability side. So that's 3 of the areas. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, but that, I'm telling you, that's what the DoD BEA is.
That's great. So you guys have that. So the commercial side is growing. And so guess what you could do? Do a presentation at the IABA chapter meeting showing how that's already happened so that the BAs can start looking and utilizing that on the commercial side. Because this is what's happening.
And when I go into different organizations.
Well, not your job. I'm just saying an opportunity. It's an opportunity.
As I go into different organizations, I'm really trying to sell them on handling things at the technical level just as well as the Department of Defense does, right? They've got the business side covered. They architect and they've got all these fancy pictures and org charts and everything else, which that's all fine and good. But how do you get your data out of this system and marry it with the information that's in this one? And they really don't have that insight. So we have been pushing more, yes, we live in the business architecture realm, and yes, we're helping them sort of build that overarching strategy. But as part of that, especially at least in the consulting world, we're trying to push more down into, you need to understand how the technology pieces actually start to play together and really build out from an enterprise architecture type view how everything is playing together.
So you guys don't really want to know about technology, right?
Yeah, so
What you want to know is what options are there.
yes.
Not
Correct.
even to the point of telling them which option is the best option.
Yep.
The business guys are involved in stock buybacks. They're involved in strategic planning as it relates to different organizational sets. Technology is becoming proliferated and they don't have a clue. And it's caused, and companies that can't compete, they're dying. The Blockbuster story is a huge story about the inability for that organization to find the technical solution to their physical infrastructure problem. And another company to rise up and find it. And you lose hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in jobs. So that's what's going on. And that's why the commercial side, the world is ruled by geeks, because the geeks know how to utilize technology to create value. So this is the business this is a BA career path. This is where we see the growth on the trusted advisor and the solution architect side, and those 3 out of project things that happen outside the project and definition of why. Any comments there?
Yeah, just as we go up the stack, we also are trying to push into the technology as well. So,
and this is an opportunity for them to actually, if they have the technical skills, maybe move into the SE space over time. And then you need the professional skills like we were talking about. You're going to move into the business space and become more of a sales engineer, become more of a solution architect, or move into the technical space to become more of an EA or an enterprise architect, or maybe move into the system architect side. So there is an opportunity to grow a new level of SEs outside of just the college folks. So we've got a lot of connectors. I don't know how your culture works in the IIBA chapter and the PMI chapters. I'd like to end on time. I love the discussion, by the way. I just don't know what the culture is if you end on time or not. We're pretty close. I think we're 5 minutes late. I hope that's not too bad. But anyways, I think you see some of these bullet points. I just see a lot of connection, a lot of potential connection, a lot of potential sharing. I also see the fact that as a trade association, you have the opportunity to maybe embrace a subcommittee on business analysis to see where that position could be utilized in the more complex, more military, more federal projects. Because right now, as much as you say there is a need, the market tells me if there's a need, and nobody's buying business analysis training or business process modeling training at the federal level. They are not buying it. I've been trying for 10 years and spent lots of marketing dollars. Those brochures and catalogs are not cheap. So somebody's got to stimulate that change if there's a need, and this is a great trade association to help do that. But any thoughts on your side?
Yeah, so when I made the jump from being an SE into the business analyst world, I was really looking for where an SE sort of fit into the commercial space. And I immediately looked out and put in systems engineer, and I got guys who deal with data power and specific software or hardware systems. Nothing that had anything to do with requirements, marrying solutions together, nothing at all. And it wasn't until I started putting in some of those terms that I found that business analysis was really where they fit and what that role was called. So as I have gone into different roles on the BA side, I have always reached back to my systems engineering. I think the technology piece is something that has been incredibly lacking in the business architecture space. All my consultants in my Center of Excellence, I tell them, every last one of them, do something that's a little bit more technical. Learn a little bit about Java. Do something so that you understand the logic pieces and the parts that play in the technology. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of value in the softer skills things that we do and have traditionally sold as a BA, where we have had to take this vision and pull all these ideas from stakeholders to create this value that could also play back into the SC role. So hopefully you see that there is some of this, there's a lot of similarity, there's a lot of crossover, but there's some places where we can hopefully help SE, and SE can definitely help BAs. And that's really what the big part of what I was hoping for when I came out and had the opportunity to come speak with you guys. So hopefully that was captured here.
And with that, we'd love to take any questions and stay as long as you'd like us to stay, or as little as you'd like us to stay. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Well, in the case of SC moving into BA world, you said the importance of domain knowledge. The SC's working in defense, stuff. You're not bringing domain knowledge.
Yeah, but you're bringing an understanding of a complex bureaucratic system. Any large retailer, CVS, Caremark, CVS, Walmart, any of the big box retailers would really embrace your complex bureaucratic system approach. And they struggle with that on a consistent basis and scaling certain things.
And even though the domain isn't the same, project that I was working on just before I left the Marine Corps was I was working on a service-oriented architecture system for the Marine Corps. The project that I'm working on now is a systems-oriented architecture solution for a financial services institution. So I was able to take the skill set just understanding services and from a technology space, and was able to deliver value over on the BA space, doing something very similar, though they were in very, very different markets.
And if you can learn DevOps, so if you have any background in developer operations as it relates to speeding up configuration in the cloud, there's a big crossover there. I know DevOps is getting a lot of talk in the government space right now. That's an area that has got great crossover for SEs. Sir, do you have a question back there?
Yeah, if you're a systems engineer and you want to, say you're looking for a job and you want to convey your skills to a company that's looking for business analysts, how would you do that?
You get rid of the business engineer, the systems engineer term. You put business analyst as your title, or you put systems engineering consultant. They understand the word consultant, they understand the word business analysis, and make sure you sprinkle in there that you do the requirements elicitation, the management, all of the catchy terms that you do on a day-to-day. Those same terms will resonate with somebody looking for a business analyst.
Use case modeling, BPMN, UML version with 3.0, because you want to be able to put the keywords that the recruiters are going to search in the data banks as well.
That's exactly what I did.
What if you're one of the more like operations research type of systems?
And you want to move to be a data analyst? I could talk to you offline about that. One of the hottest jobs out there right now is operations researchers moving to data analysts. You know Informs, right? So you know the CAP certification? Go look at the CAP certification and get it, and you'll make a ton of money in like 6 months. Data analysis is the hottest thing out there. The data analysis is the hottest thing going right now as it relates to understanding. It's not, the concept of big data is all cool, but it's really making the decisions with the data that you've got, and data-driven decision making go in that direction. I'm telling, based on what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Data science you're talking about.
So see, data science and data analyst, two different things. Data scientist is a PhD statistician. There's only a few of them, and companies don't need them. What companies need is data analysts who can take an SSRS set of data or a Cognos set of data and actually make interpolations from it. We should be doing this. We can do this. This is what's going on here. And then no companies are hiring physicists, PhD physicists, because of their math background to do data-driven decision making. My brother is a chemistry PhD at Michigan. He lost one of his postdocs to one of the financial companies doing mathematical data analysis. That's a hot area right now. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Anything from the outside world?
Hold on. Okay. No, okay,
Nothing?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Hope you got some value out of it.
I'll read the time.